On the phone, we have a coaching legend, former Tennessee coach. He actually played at Tennessee back in the day, Johnny Majors. How you doing, Coach Majors?
I'm doing great this morning. Things in Chicago, right?
Exactly. The weather's probably a little more humid down there than in Chicago.
No, we had an unusual thing. We during the 4th of July for 4 or 5 days. We had the greatest 4 or 5 days I believe I've ever seen in the 4th of July weekend in Tennessee. It was about mid-80s, no humidity, little breeze, and I had my golf tournament 2 days ago. Well, for Saturday and Sunday, then on the Cumberland Plateau, which is right at the edge of East Tennessee and Middle Tennessee. Nice breeze, about 2,000 feet high. We had an unusual storm come through here last night, dropped the temperature about 92 the day before, it dropped to about 15 degrees. So things are nice today. We get a lot of hot weather in the summer, but I've also lived in the Midwest when I was head coach at Iowa State. And it can get hot there, man. I often wondered what God had wrought when I went to Ames, Iowa. Cold winters, man. At times even 35 below zero with wind chill. And then in the summer, the humidity was hot. I said, my goodness, I don't know where this all came from, but if God decides that's the way he wants it, I guess that's the way we'll live with it. I'm doing fine. My golf game is taken pretty much, but I'm getting some things done and having a good time.
Who came for your golf tournament? A lot of your former players?
Am I a former golf player?
Oh, did a lot of your former players come out for your tournament?
Oh yeah, I have a bunch of them, sure. Innocent from Chicago, my first captain at Iowa State, George Dimitri was from Chicago. He was a junior in spring practice and was a senior my first season, and he was my first football captain. He's been coming in every year, and I've had a few Iowa Staters come in. And Tony Dorsett from Pittsburgh came in a couple of years ago, and several Tennessee players and some of my former coaches come in, and a lot of lifelong friends I've got down here from Tennessee where I grew up.
When it came time for you to make a choice of where to go to college, was there any question that it was going to be Tennessee and nobody else?
I was always a West Point Army fan. When I was growing up in Tennessee in 1944, 45, 46, when I was 8, 9, and 10, Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis were my heroes at West Point. I wanted to go to Army, but then I also, as a youngster, started being in Tennessee, and I liked Vanderbilt too because I was an hour and a half south of there. I grew up in Lynchburg, Tennessee, where they make Jack Daniel's whiskey, the most famous whiskey in the world. But I wasn't drinking in those days, of course. But I got to be where I followed Vanderbilt and Tennessee and Alabama along with West Point. West Point was my favorite. When I got up to the age where I was being recruited, I led the whole state score in my last 3 years. We had a very small school. There were only 32 in the graduating class, and my dad was the head coach. And we only lost one game in 7 years. We lost one game and tied one with 4 or 3 of my brothers and I, 2 years apart, playing in the same backfield at one time. 2 of us were. And I was recruited by a lot of people because I led the whole state in scoring. And I ended up, I didn't visit very much. I like being around home on the weekend. I went to Georgia once, and I went to Auburn once, and I went to Tennessee twice, and I didn't go to Florida. Some other people that recruited me in Virginia Tech, and West Point. But frankly speaking, I felt more at home at Auburn. I really considered it very seriously because the two little towns where I'm from, Lynchburg has one stoplight and had a pool room and had a town square, but no movie. And Huntland, where my dad took us where we won all those games in the early 50s, they had no movie house, which you would call a movie theater, and they had a pool room, so I played a lot of pool when I was a teenager. And I felt at home at Auburn because they had a couple of pool rooms and a movie house. Knoxville was much bigger. It was a big country town now. It's a pretty good-sized city. And it's bigger in football. They had a 50,000-seat stadium, and Auburn only had a 28,000-seat stadium, believe it or not. Now they have about 85,000. Tennessee has 108. But I wanted to play single-wing football because I was a single-wing tailback, and Tennessee was one of the 3 or 4 teams in America that was using single-wing. Dick Kazmaier, that was a tailback at Princeton, was Heisman Trophy winner tailback when I was in high school, and UCLA was using it at that time in Tennessee, and I was a single-wing tailback, and I ended up coming here not thinking I could ever play big-time football. I was a 155-pounder, but worked out great. I had a great spring practice. I was very concerned about making the big time, but cracked the ice pretty quickly and had a rather good sophomore year. I got hurt and missed 4 games, but I had an exciting spring practice. And my last 2 years, I was the starter, of course, my last 2 years. And I'm glad I came to Tennessee because it was very exciting. Knoxville was a great college campus at the University of Tennessee. It's a great atmosphere, beautiful mountains around here, and rivers and all that stuff. In fact, I'm looking out my kitchen window right now at the Tennessee River. It runs right at the bottom part of my yard. So that's the way it is right now. And I did have a hard time with that decision, but my mother said the day before my signing date, she said, "John, I know you're having a hard time making a decision." And said, "If it's that hard, I'd like to see you stay in the state." Our mother and daddy were very distant, but they didn't just smother us without giving us a lot of freedom when we were kids too. And they let us make our own decisions, and we got to getting football scholarships. And my 4 younger brothers all played college ball. Joe played at Florida State, quarterback and safety man. My brother Bill played the same position I did at Tennessee, single wing tailback and safety man. And Larry, my 4th brother, 3rd brother actually, played for my dad at Sewanee after he went to college head coaching as a single wing tailback and wing back. And my younger brother Bob, who's an 8-year skip there, he was an All-American at Tennessee and led the nation in punt returns and interceptions as a senior in '71. So we fortunately were able to get our scholarships paid for. And we knew we were going to college as little boys. As Mother said to you guys, you boys are going to college. And we had one sister, and she said, "You have to work your way through school and help the other ones when you get through." So we all knew we were going to college. But fortunately, all the 5 boys got a chance to have their academics paid for, and therefore my mother and daddy could send Shirley in to Tennessee. So, and at one time, this is not important to you all, at one time, my future wife and Joe's future wife and Bill's future wife and Shirley and my sister all lived in the same dormitory at UT on the same floor. I guess you want to go to other subjects probably, but now.
No problem. I mean, they said that you played in the 2nd greatest game in college football history when you guys beat Georgia Tech 6-0 in Atlanta. What was that game like?
Well, it was a game going into it that I was very convinced that one mistake could have cost the game. And the year before, we had tied Georgia Tech 7-7, or they had tied us. It doesn't make a difference. They won the championship, the Southeastern Conference Championship in '55, and I played the whole game. I never left the game. I played 60 minutes playing both ways. We tied 7-7, and they went to the Sugar Bowl and beat University of Pittsburgh 14-7. Well, we basically had we had a junior sophomore team. We had one senior, and he was our captain, a guard, and Georgia Tech only had 1 or 2 seniors on those 2 good teams. So we were going to Atlanta the next year, and we pretty well were sure both teams were individually that this was going to be probably for the big time, maybe the national championship, certainly for the Southeastern. And it was chosen by Sports Illustrated in 1969 in the 100th year of college football. It was voted the second most exciting game, the second greatest game in college football history to I think it was second to, I believe, Ohio State, maybe in Notre Dame in 1935 or 36. And that's not objective. Of course, you can't really pick the best 10 teams in 150 years of football now. Like it's about 150 years old now, in a few years. But we were selected number 2 in Sports Illustrated. So it was right down to the final points, and you knew that a fumble or an interception, and I was a passer, and I did all the punting, and I running and called the plays in the huddle, and I played straight to them full time. But we only made a mistake that day, and our kick punting game was outstanding. I kicked one pooch kick down to the half-yard line. It turned sideways and started Georgia Tech on the 1 foot line. And a quick kick for the only time in my career on first down. We were on our 19-yard line, and I just made a first down with a 4-yard off tackle play, and they had their safety man backed up because Bobby Dodd, the Georgia Tech coach, and Bowden White, our Tennessee coach, both were great All-Americans at Tennessee under General Robert Neyland. And both of them are only 2 of the 3 people in college football history who've been inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, both as a player or coach. So our team and I and the Georgia Tech team are the only 2 teams in history that's ever played in a game with two College Hall of Fame football and coaches against each other. And they were both great coaches, but conservative. They quick kicked out of the T formation, surprise element, a lot of times on third down, occasionally on second. And we did the same thing. We were in a single wing, and we kicked spirals, and they kicked an end-over-end side kick, saddle kick, where the fullback stepped sideways and snapped it to him underneath the quarterback's legs. He did it over his instep, and it rolled end over end. But we'd take 3 steps back in the single wing, and they'd snap us the ball. We did a low spiral, so I kicked one from our 19 to about Georgia Tech's 12. It hit and ran about 30 yards. But it was a great kicking game, a game with few mistakes, and it was a classic. And they were number 2 in America. We were number 3 that weekend, and next Monday we were number 1. Oklahoma number 2. We were both undefeated, and Oklahoma ended up outholding us for the national championship. They were 10-0. We were 10-0. They were defending 10-0 champions from the year before, and I think that gave them a little bit of a favoritism. But they had a great team with Tommy McDonald and Jerry Tubbs and Clinton Thomas. And we had a great team, but we just got outpolled. That's when they picked the Heisman. Well, they do now, 2 also. But that's when they picked the national championship team before the bowl games.
What was it like playing for your dad and then playing for Coach Wyatt?
Well, I guess I'm one of the luckiest people in the world in many ways. My father was the winning coach in Tennessee at that time. My father never went to college, but he's a smart man, and he learned quickly from other people. He was a barber in World War II when I was 8 years old in Lynchburg, Tennessee, where they make Jack Dennis gave up football in 43 because they ran pretty short of players. That's a little bitty town. I see about 30 people in the class, and there were about 28 that came out for football. So they wanted to restart football. My dad was driving back and forth to Tullahoma, where they had a 70,000 infantry camp. They was barbering, and we lived in Lynchburg, and they wanted to start the team. The players did want to restart a team in 44. My dad did not go to college, but he was a great athlete, well known around that area. His football, basketball, and baseball. And played a lot of amateur football, baseball, and basketball at that time. But he was an all-around athlete. He could punt, pass, and run. He was a great athlete. And they said, "How about Shirley Major?" So the principal said, "We can't pay him." So my dad barbered in the daytime up to Tullahoma, 13 miles away. Came back, coached the team with no playbook, no assistant coach. They had no films in those days. Strictly coaching the single wing and wide tackle 6. And also the short punt formation that they used at Tennessee. the center wing, that is. So he built Lynchburg up, and then in 1949, that was 1944, 1949, he goes to a little town called Huntland, and that's right at the foot of the mountains, right at the southern part of Middle Tennessee, 5 miles north of Alabama. And he taught those players how to play football. They never had football. They only had basketball and baseball. My dad showed them how to put the uniform on, how to play. They won 2 games the first year and lost 5. I was playing at Lynchburg as a freshman and played against him. We won 1 game and lost 9. I was a starting quarterback at 135 pounds, but I scored 2 touchdowns against my dad. We beat him 19-13. He said it'd be the last that blame time a son of mine plays against me, and I was the oldest of 5 boys. The first 4 of us boys were 2 years apart, so 2 of us always played the same backfield. Yet my father was a great fundamentalist. He taught us all how to punt, pass when we were little boys, and we were all good athletes. He taught us how to sidestep, stiff arm, how to run, how to tackle. He wasn't a doting father, but he was a other father. We were disciplined. He had a great sense of humor, but he knew sports and just had a natural knack and was well taught in high school by his coach. And we played all 3 sports for him at that little town called Huntland, and we didn't lose but 1 game the last 7 years he was there. Then he goes to the University of the South at Sewanee, Tennessee. They call it Sewanee, not Sewanee. That's in Georgia. And my brother Larry played for him there. And my father had the only 2 undefeated teams at Sewanee in the 20th century. He had one of his captains on the undefeated team was from Chicago. He was one of my brother Larry's best friends in 1963. Bob Davis. He was the captain of Sewanee's 1963 undefeated team. So Sewanee recruited people all over the country because it's such a great academic school. And it was great playing for him, but he's tough, he's demanding. And also Bowden White was. Bowden White, the Tennessee head coach, is the only coach in history of college football, started in 1869, to have won 3 major championships at 3 major conferences. At one time, the old Skyline was a major conference. It's now the Big West or something, with Wyoming, Arizona State, Arizona at that time, Utah State, and Colorado State. They won the championship twice in the last 2 years. He was a Tennessee All-American, as I mentioned earlier. And then he went to Arkansas, won the Southwest Conference Championship the 2nd year, came to Tennessee the spring of my sophomore year, turned us around. We'd been 4-6 and 5-5. We went 6-3-1 the first year and went 10-0 the 2nd year. He won championships in all 3 conferences. Barry Bryant never did that. Jim Tatum never did that. Duffy Daugherty never did that. Bud Wilkinson never did that. So I played for 2 coaches, fortunately, that I would have loved to play for. So I played again, and they were in the same kind of category of Vince Lombardi and Barry Bryant. They were tough. They were demanding, but they knew how to teach you. And if you played for them, you loved playing for them. If you didn't hustle, they would probably scare you to death, and it'd make you wish you never saw Sewanee or Tennessee or Alabama or the Green Bay Packers. So the tough coaches that are smart and also will pat you on the back when you do something well, you'll do anything to please them if you're a football player and want to do well and excel. I was very fortunate to play with 2 of the greatest coaches in America, my father and Bowden White.
You came in 2nd in the Heisman. You lost to Paul Hornung, who was playing for Notre Dame, and they had a 2-8 record. How hard was that to accept?
Well, frankly speaking, I never got myself built up to that I was going to win the Heisman. There was another great players there. That was one of the greatest draft groups in college in history from that played in the NFL. Several Hall of Famers in the NFL were on that All-American squad. And Horner was first and I was second. Comment McDonald, a great Hall of Famer in college and pro football from Oklahoma, and played for the Philadelphia Eagles, was third. And his teammate, Jerry Tubbs, the center linebacker, was fourth. and they'd won 20 straight games, so they gave them the advantage. Jim Brown in Syracuse, one of the great players of all time. Many people say could be the greatest running back in history. He was fifth, so I didn't get myself all built up to be disappointed. But when I came in second, I was very disappointed. But I never had any bitterness about it because Horning was a great player. He played on a bad team, but he could punt, he could pass, he could run. I did all three of them too. He played defense, and he was a great pro. But you select the Heisman because of college football. Well, he was a great college player. I don't resent that. I'd like to have won it. One thing that didn't help me for sure, I missed 25% of the season as a senior. I missed 2 complete games, at 2/3 of the game where I had my best game against Duke, my second game when I scored 3 touchdowns, and in the first quarter and a half, or less than a half of a quarter, and made another long run and got hurt on that run when I was hit from behind when I had to slow up from the blocking. I missed the next game. I missed the last 2.5 quarters of that game, and I also missed the North Carolina game, which was homecoming. I did go in for one kick, a quick kick, because Coach White wanted me to be able to go in because it's homecoming, but I had some tender ribs that had separated against Maryland the week before, and they held me out because we were playing Georgia Tech the week after North Carolina. They wanted to make certain I was in the best shape I could be in for Georgia Tech, but I was sore and tender. I could have played, but I quick kicked, so I played one play in the North Carolina game, didn't play a game in Chattanooga. In a 10-game schedule, I lost. That's 25% of it, the best I can recall, and I'm not mathematical. So if I played 2 and lost at least 2.5 games out of 10, that cost me quite a few yards, and that would have helped my chances. But I don't resent that, and I've never been bitter about that. Horning's a great friend of mine. I see him at the Derby quite often, and so we've had a few laughs about that. But we don't have time to tell a couple of Horning stories right now, I'm sure. But I respect him. He was a great player, and that's the way it goes.
Now, after your college career, very illustrious, as we say, runner-up for the Heisman Trophy, we would think the next step would be to the NFL, but you ended up in the Canadian Football League. How did that occur? Well,
I say I'm a really confident person now at my age, 79 years old as of May 21st, but even as a little boy, I never felt like I could maybe do something until I got involved with it. I cried before I went to the first grade because I couldn't read. Well, my mother and daddy made me go over there and to school. They took me in the car. We lived right over across the hill there in Lynchburg, walking distance that day. And I got there and I didn't want to leave. I liked learning to read and spell and write. My goodness, and playing football and fox and dogs at halftime and at recess and beating the new girls and new boys. I loved it. And then I was concerned about playing high school football, and my first start wasn't too good. I was a starting quarterback in my first 2 games. We lost 58-0, and then 75-6 the next week. But I had nightmares before I came to Tennessee when I was 18 years old because I was afraid I couldn't play in the big time. Well, right away, I found out I could make people miss me in college like they did in high school, and I was quite surprised. So I never was overconfident in anything I did. And the question, about the Canadian League, I don't think I would have been a great pro. I could do virtually everything that we needed to in football. I believe I was second in the nation on punting, and I broke the all-time Tennessee record in pass percentage and had over a 5-yard average rushing my senior year. Those are pretty strong statistics, but I missed 2.5 games. And Montreal, I signed before the NFL draft. And that's why I didn't get a chance to play in the All-Star game because they offered me a $10,000 salary and a $1,000 bonus. And that was a lot of money in that time. Yeah. And I didn't think I thought I had a better chance to play in the Canadian League than I did there. And I played 1 year. I started. I didn't have a great year. I got hurt a few times. I re-hurt my shoulder that I'd hurt in college. And I came back and started coaching at Tennessee because Coach Wyatt, my head coach, said, Johnny, if you want to coach when you get through, I'll have a job for you. So I came back here and finished a couple of courses after the Canadian season was over and got my degree and started coached the student. I was a student coach that year, then went full-time 2 years with Coach White, 4 years then to Mississippi State after I married my young bride who was a sophomore at Tennessee while I was coaching. And then we went from Mississippi State up to 4 years with Frank Rawls, one of the great coaches in the country, and that was one of the greatest training sessions for me that any coach could ever have because he's one of the great coaches of all time and a Hall of Famer. So I coached and played for some great, great people. I was carefully taught and greatly taught, so I give credit to those people for that. But I knew what I knew, and I knew it well because I was profoundly grounded by Shirley Majors, Bowden White, and Bowden White came out of the Nealon family. So did Frank Rawls. Frank Rawls played for Bobby Dodd in the 40s, and Bobby Dodd is the one that was coaching against Bowden White in the Georgia Tech Tennessee game, and the one that we won the Classic. And Frank Rawls was the offensive backfield coach. So I was lucky to be around some great people, and I got a lot out of it. And I learned from other people that I hired. On my first staff, I had Jimmy Johnson as my defensive lineman who played for us at Arkansas, and I had Jackie Sherrill as my B team coach, and Larry Lakeland, who was an outstanding coach. He ended up being head scout for the Dallas Cowboys in charge of their personnel, but also he coached with me twice, and he was a very successful coach at Arkansas State. On my first staff at Iowa State, I had like 6 coaches who became head coaches later on. I don't think any coach in history probably had more future head NFL or college coaches coaching them than I have, including Barry Bryant and a lot of Bud Wilkinson, a lot of other people. Not comparing my coaching with them, but we turned out a lot of people who came through my program who were very successful as head coaches in college and professional football.
Who do you think your best assistant coach was?
The best assistant coach. I really couldn't do that except in the top 1 percentile. If that's not the top 5 percentile. Jimmy Johnson, Larry Lacewell, Jackie Sherrill, Don Capers, who became a 2-time head coach at 2 expansion teams in the NFL, at the Houston Texans, and also the Jacksonville Pro team. And those are 3 of the best. And I'm going to leave somebody else to do. Joe Arizona, my offensive line coach at Iowa State, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee, became head coach at Oregon State, a tough job at that time, but he also was a long-time special teams coach at the Dallas Cowboys. And I hired him when he was 24. Jackie Sherrill was 24. Jimmy Johnson was 24. I was 32 when I hired him as head coach. Larry Lacewell was 28. A lot of people probably don't know who he is, but he's a terrific coach. And he was trained under Barry Bryant and Jim McKenzie at Oklahoma. That's off the top of my head, some of the best ones I had. And I'm sure I've left somebody out, but I can't tell you the top one. But I had some very, very top quality coaches. And John Gruden got his first start with me as a graduate coach right out of the University of Dayton. He coached with me for 2 years, and also the new head coach at the Cleveland Browns, Mike Pettin, was also got his first job with me as a graduate coach at Pittsburgh when I went back there in the early 90s. So those are 2 outstanding young coaches that started their training under me in college. So we've had quite a few. They've made me better, and I think they got some good learning and teachings from me and our fundamentals and our background.
Now, as you say, you were pretty young when you took your first head coaching job at Iowa State. How did you end up in Ames?
I was very young. How did I end up what?
How'd you end up at Iowa State as your first job as a head coach?
Okay. Well, Iowa State, when I took it, I can tell you several stories about that. But it was called a coach's graveyard when I took it. To this day, Iowa State has never won a football championship. They came close one year when they had to, when the field goal kicker, well after I left, maybe 12 years ago or so, when the Big 8 conference went to the Big 12 and they split, I named this 2 field goals down inside the 15 or so and an extra point on top of that. Lost the game 1 point to Colorado. But anyway, they'd never been to a bowl game. And my first flew, they were 2-8 when we went there. And I was green. I didn't know what to expect. I was up there. I was never was a smoker. I was a cocktail smoker. But I was rather nervous there talking about starting the first grade and going to Tennessee. I was concerned about making it there too. And I'd get up in the middle of the night pacing the floor and every hour and an hour wondering what the heck are we going to do. And to win here, it was very discouraging and I was somewhat depressed. So anyway, we won. They were 2-8 the year before. We won 3-7 and 3-7 the second year. The third year we went 5-6. We recruited really great the third year. 5-6, and the fourth year we went 8-3. That was the winningest team in Iowa State history since 1910 or something like that. And they had won 8 games for 50 years or 60. And we went to a bowl game. We only lost 3 games, and the teams we lost to were to Nebraska. They were 12-0, won the national championship. Oklahoma was 11-1. They only lost to Nebraska. Colorado was 10-2. They only lost to Nebraska and Oklahoma. And we were 8-3. We only lost to those 3. It's the only time in college football history, you can look this up, that 3 teams from the same conference finished 1, 2, and 3 after the bowl games. And that was the year that we were 8-3 with the first bowl game in Iowa State history. And the next year we went to the Liberty Bowl in Memphis and lost to Georgia Tech on a 2-point play. We scored in the last minute or two, and they beat us 31-30, I believe it was, and we missed 2 points. And the next morning I went to Pittsburgh, where they hadn't been to a bowl game in 17 years, and they were 1-10 the year before I went there. And about 3 straight years in 1965, 6 and 7, I believe it was. They had 3 consecutive 1-9 records. They were 3-27 and hadn't been to a bowl game. So the first year we went to the Fiesta Bowl, we were 6-3-1, lost to a great Arizona State team. And then the next year we were 7-4, did not get a bowl game, believe it or not, because there weren't that many bowls. The next year we were 8-3 and went to the Sun Bowl. And we won the Sun Bowl. We were 9-3, beat Kansas. And then the next year we were 12-0, the only undefeated, untied team in America when we were national champs.
When we talked to Tony Dorsett, he said that he wanted to go to Penn State his whole life, but he got upset at Joe Paterno because he said Joe Paterno never recruited him. He just assumed he was going there, and he never met Joe Paterno. He goes, I went to Pittsburgh and it was the best decision I ever made.
Well, yeah, I'd say it was. And it sure, I consider it the best decision he ever made because he certainly made a great difference. We had a great team without Tony Dorsett, but that I don't want to sound ridiculous, but he put us over the top. He was the championship edge. But we had a better team like we did at Tennessee in '56 and Georgia Tech had in '56. We were a sophomore junior team in '75 when we won 8-3 in '75 and beat Kansas in the Sun Bowl. But Tony came there and started as a freshman. He had over 1,000-yard rushes in 4 straight years. That was an ideal place for him. I've never told anybody in my life that you will start as a freshman. I've never told anybody you're going to start if you come to UT and transfer from junior college. But I did tell him, and I've told some people this, some of the greatest, I think you've got a great chance to start at Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, we lost our number 1 tailback when the spring before, that was my first spring at Pittsburgh. I got a young man named Mike Mahallett from Steubenville tore up his knee in the spring game, for crying out loud, and he was the only decent running back we had. And we signed Dorsett. It was called Dorset at that time. That's another story about when he changed his name to Dorsett. But he was amazing. The tougher he got, the tougher he got. He was a great team player. He hustled on every play in practice. You never had to get after him. Players loved him. Coaches loved him. He'd stay after dark till dark after games in the afternoon and sign autographs to people. And he always treated people great who treated him with respect. There's never been one like him. And also, for your information, they're talking about we lost to the 3 teams in the only time in history have ever been 1, 2, 3 in the conference. And the Big 8 to Nebraska, Colorado, and Oklahoma. Nebraska, Oklahoma, Colorado. Tony Dorsett is the only person in football history who's ever done these five things. Of course, they never had the Heisman until Paul Hornung and I were born in 1935. That was the first year of the Heisman. But Tony Dorsett, played on the college national championship team. The next year in January, at the same venue in the Superdome in New Orleans, the Dallas Cowboys, he was a rookie starter. The Dallas Cowboys beat Denver Broncos for the Super Bowl championship. So he won the college, played on the college national championship team. 1 year later, the Super Bowl championship team as a rookie starting for them. Number 3, he is in the College Hall of Fame. Number 4, he's in the Professional Hall of Fame. And number 5, he won the Heisman. Of course, they didn't have the Heisman when Red Grange and Jim Thorpe and people like that, but there's been a lot of players since 1935 for 79 years who could have done all of them. But he's the only person. That's how good he is. And he's as great a guy as he is a player.
Now, after winning the national championship, Tennessee comes a-calling and says, hey, we want you to be our football coach. Was that a difficult choice for you to go back home or not?
Without a doubt. I think it's the most difficult decision I ever had to make. We all have ego. We all dream. I've been a dreamer. Growing up, I wanted to be Doc Blanchard, Lynn Davis at Army and all, and then I wanted to play with the Boston Red Sox or the St. Louis Cardinals, or play with the Kentucky Wildcats basketball team. But you think about coming back to your alma mater, even when you're in college, if you're going to coach. But I didn't know I was going to coach when I was in college, even though my dad was a coach. But of all times to call me, when Doug Dickey left here and went to Florida and Bill Battle took over, I wanted the job very bad. But I just the guy at Iowa State, and we hadn't gotten to that 5-6 record. That was my 3rd year. It started before my 3rd year. So anyway, and I wanted the job in the worst way, and they took Bill Battle. Well, of all the timing, when Bill Battle decided to resign under pressure, and he had a good record here, but the last 3 or 4 years it went down. And Bill's a fine man, has been greatly successful in business. They called me after we won, before we won the national championship. Bill Battle resigned the week of the Penn State game. I said, I'm not going to talk to anybody about Tennessee or anything else because we're number 1 in the country and I'm going to spend my time on this football team. They called me, and after the Penn State game, I talked to them the next morning here up in Pittsburgh and came down here 2 or 3 days later and took the job. Don't know that I made a mistake. I had a great career in Tennessee. I got reacquainted with a lot of people, and it's a great place to live. It's a great tradition. And coming back to your alma mater, and a lot of it has to do with the pride, rebuilding the program, and also some ego involved. And I guess a lot of us who are athletes and not athletes have some ego and like to be a so-called hero, I guess. But overall, I think I'm a pretty modest person. I think my friends think I'm pretty modest. through the years, I've gained a lot of confidence, and I think I had natural confidence when I was younger, but I was never assured of myself until I really got in and got it done. That was a tough decision, and it took a while to get it turned around. And the worst thing about it was the ending, of course, as it is many times, when I was thrown out the back door after we had the three greatest years of my entire career back-to-back in 1989, 90, and 91. And we were 8-3 in 92. And I had heart surgery at the beginning of that year, missed the first three games they won. And I had some disloyalty in the part of the president, the athletic director for sure, and they were not straight with me in their integrity. And I had an assistant that was not loyal, in my opinion. So I was shockingly relieved, and then went back to Pittsburgh, which was we certainly didn't set the woods on fire when I went back. I wasn't at my best, but we did leave them with a better program than what they had. The year after I left, Walt Harris, who coached me at Tennessee, took them to a bowl game, and he left them with better players than what I inherited, and I was pleased for Walt because he's a great person, he's a fine coach, and he was loyal to me and a terrific coach. Oh, he's one of the top coaches I had. He's in the top 5 percentile. Without question, I'd be amiss if I didn't mention Walt Harris for crying out loud. So anyway, that's the way that turned out. We left him better, and I don't know when I depart this good old world, I've had a good life, and if somebody would say, how would you like to be remembered? I'd say, well, I think about that. I think I would be remembered as an outstanding builder. I left every program. And I should say we. It's the staff and team builds things. I'm the head coach. I didn't do it by myself. But I'm not to be known as a builder because we left every program a lot better shape after I left. Not only did we build a winner and a competitive program, but we also, the people behind me were successful because they inherited a much stronger program by far than what I did.
Do you think if anybody tried to bring back the single wing today, they could be successful?
No, not really. Not really. I'll tell you one thing I thought about a lot of times. I know I have some dreams and crazy ones and some good ones, but I've thought about this many times. What I wouldn't have given if we had the spread offense when I was playing. Well, we had 2 tight ends, and we had a wing back right outside one end, and we had 3 backs in the backfield. And I'm the deep back, safety, and the tailback handles the ball about 80% of the time. But his punting and his passing and his running and returning punts and returning kickoffs, I did that, all of that. That's what the Tennessee's tailback did. And I'd say that what was the question you asked? I lost my train of thought.
Whether anybody could play single wing football nowadays.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of the ball handling is similar because people are in the shotgun now, and the center snaps the ball back between his legs to the quarterback. And a lot of those quarterbacks could run. Manziel, for crying out loud, and Cam Newton and Tebow. My goodness, but to been a quarterback and that thing, and being able to run, quick kick, and pass, the field's so much wide open. You've got split receivers out there 15 to 20 yards, and you break up the middle, and they're turning their backs and running and covering their receiver. You break up the middle, you don't have to dodge 7 or 8 people to make a 70-yard run. You break the line of scrimmage, you break a tackle, and make a move on a couple of 3 people. You're going 70 yards for a touchdown. The ball handling is simpler, but it doesn't have the power blocking, solid blocking that is more simplified and more conservative than what you have today. Today's modern football with a spread offense and with outstanding quarterbacks is absolutely phenomenal. And some of the speed is absolutely phenomenal. But I'd love to play the spread offense, my crying out loud, being able to run an option to your left and either keep it or pitch it, according to what the end does. We didn't have that option. Our hole was called pre-called. You ran where the play was called unless it was jammed up and you bounced outside or you cut back inside. But they didn't have everybody spread out all over the field. No, I don't think the single wing like it was played at those days would be successful at all.
You mentioned Paul.
You see, you know, they call this, what's this thing? They call it Houston nut put in Arkansas where you got to put the halfback back in a tailback position and 3 backs in the backfield or 4 and run a power sweep and something like that. They run up to the middle of the line like they're going to run and then jump up to a jump pass over the middle, little short stuff. But that's been very successful, and the pros have used a little bit of that. There's a word for it I can't think of right now. The Houston nut, I think that Arkansas put in, but some other people have used it as well, putting it back, snapping it back to him, and letting him run off tackle because the pros aren't used to defending it that much.
Yeah, but in Arkansas, when you got running backs like Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, and the guy from Cleveland back there, you have 3 NFL quality running backs. It's hard to defend that.
Yeah, and they don't do it that much. They do it periodically, you know, and not consistently. That makes it more effective. Yeah, they've used that, but no, you couldn't use it full time. I don't think at all. I think they'd fog up on you on defense and struck you a lot more times than you would have openness to run the ball with.
Next time you talk to Paul Hornig, ask him about that college all-star game when him and Jim Brown were playing for Otto Graham. You're lucky you weren't on that team because he said Jim Brown pulled himself out of the game because he said, this guy's going to get us killed.
I'm just glad that I didn't have to play against Jim Brown because I would not have looked forward to attacking him once he broke the line of scrimmage because I played safety man. I was a pretty damn good safety man. I know you all may think I'm not as much as what I really am, but I was a pretty darn good safety man, and I was a sure tackler. But if Jim Brown broke the middle, I don't know what I knew that maybe turned and run, but I thought sure wouldn't be putting my shoulder pad into his midriff or into his chest. I would have been going for his ankles. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Aim for his shoelaces, and I think you might be okay. But other than that, not too many defensive backs came out on the winning end of any of that stuff.
No, I don't think I'd have been. I don't think I'd have been one of a kind. One of the few that would have missed him. I think I'd have been one of the many that missed Jim Brown, even if that's tackled his shoestrings.
Now, another one of your assistant coaches. It was a fellow that Chicago Bear fans remember, a guy by the name of Dave Wanstedt. How was he as an assistant?
Dave was a graduate assistant. I'd forgotten about it. Dave never coached for me full time.
Okay.
I gave him like John Gruden and now Mike Patton and Bounds. I gave him his first coaching job because he was one of our captains my first year at Pittsburgh in 1973. And he played a little bit, I think, the Green Bay Packers a couple of years and came back and was a student coach and got, I guess, worked on his master's degree. And I ended up, he never coached full time with me. I left, he was still there. And I came to Tennessee, and then he stayed there with Jackie Searle. And then when Jimmy Johnson left Jackie Searle's staff and went to Oklahoma State, he took Dave Wanstedt with him at Oklahoma State. The interesting thing about Wanstedt is that he played offensive tackle. And as a graduate coach, I think he worked more with the offense. But Jimmy took him to Oklahoma State, and he ended up coaching defense. And Jimmy did a great job with the Miami Dolphins, first the Oklahoma State, then Miami Dolphins, and also before that the Miami Hurricanes. So they turned out to be an outstanding assistant coach, and I'd say a good head coach. And I don't know what everybody else thinks, but a good head coach in Chicago, and a very, very, very good assistant coach for darn sure. Did a great job with Jimmy Johnson.
Now, the actor Lee Majors adopted his last name because of you. Is that true?
Well, we called each other cousins, but yes. When I was a junior, senior at Tennessee, I wore number 45. And Lee Majors was 4 years younger than I am, and he's playing my same position in Middlesboro, Kentucky, which is right on the Tennessee, Kentucky border. But in fact, Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky all really come to a point right there in Middlesboro. Only about 2 hours north of Knoxville, at the most. And he was a big fan of Tennessee and a big fan of mine, and I didn't know this till I was coaching at Iowa State. But he was a good athlete in high school, and I didn't know it. I don't remember meeting him, but in my last game, he told me later on we got to know each other, that he met me at the Kentucky game, which was our last home game, and then won our 9th game that year out of 10. And I had one more game to go and beat Vanderbilt. But anyway, he said I gave him my chin strap after the game, and he said he still got it. And his name was Harvey Lee Yerry. And he went to the University of Indiana on a football scholarship. And he transferred for some reason. I don't know whether he got the fraternity fight or what, but he went to Eastern Kentucky and played football. How much he played, I don't know. But he left there and didn't finish and went to Hollywood as Lee Yerry. He went shortened from Harvey Lee to Lee Yerry. Played in a few Class B movies, I guess, and then when he went on, before he went on to Big Valley, he changed to Lee Majors. And we got to be good friends. I haven't seen Lee in 10, 12 years, but he used to come to the pit games occasionally. And he came up the first time, and I dressed him in our coaching outfit, the blue coaching shirt and gold coaching shirt and blue pants. We were blue and gold. Gave him a new pair of Adidas. I believe Adidas was what we were wearing at the time, and that's what he wore when he started on these $6 Million Man. That's what when the show first started with showing it coming on. They showed that every week where he was running. Those white shoes on, those are the Adidas that I had the equipment man give him when he came up to his first game, and he watched it beat Syracuse my first year at Pittsburgh, and then came back for another game or two, and then came to the Sugar Bowl game, and he came out to California. He was in California and started playing one of the early pigskin crises when we played Colorado. We tied Colorado. That was the year they won the national championship, and had the good fortune of having 5 plays against Missouri. But the officials missed the downs, and they scored on the 5th down and beat somebody and won the national championship in the regular season.
So those shoes gave him all his speed?
Beg your pardon?
Those shoes gave him all his speed?
I guess betting on all that bionic stuff. I don't know much about technology or bionics, but I guess the shoes didn't hurt him for sure. It didn't hurt Dorsett. He used the same make of shoes that Tony Dorsett used.
Speaking of the $6 Million Man, does it amaze you what some college football coaches get paid nowadays? Well, once upon a time, football coaches would make as much as a university president. Now they far surpass that at a lot of places.
Yeah, sometimes a few I made more than the president, but most of the time they did not. They take it to that length, but no, I think that maybe Coach Bryant never got paid more than the president, but I'm sure he made a lot of outside money.
Yeah.
It's pretty well incomprehensible. And quite often, I think there's a lot of pressure in college football. But I think probably a lot of us, I'm not envious or jealous of what they do. Heck, and why should I be? I can't do anything about it. But people at Tennessee were pretty tight with the money. The administrators I worked for, they were the ones that ended up letting me release me and told me I could stay here as administrator after I had my 5 bypasses and missed the first 3 games. And listen, they were pretty tight, the ones I worked for, and they were quick to get what they could get. But I did work for a really high quality man in Lamar Alexander, who's now a United States Senator. He was here only 3 years, unfortunately. He's still been here. If he went to be the Secretary of Education under George Bush or somebody. And then I hope it was better than George Bush. But anyway, I like George Bush Sr. He's a very fine man. I'll move on. Lou Holtz missed 1 or 2 games when he was head coach. And his assistant, Bob, I know him very well. He's in football now. I mean, he's the head coach at New Mexico. He was assistant to Lou, took over for 2 or 3 games, and Notre Dame won. And they gave the victories to Lou, even though he wasn't coaching. When I was out for 3 weeks before I came in and coached the last 8 games, the school gave Phil Fulmer those 3 victories, even though I'm the head coach that put the team together. So that showed you the administration I worked for when I was let go.